The neon sign of Riley's bar flickered against the darkness like a dying heartbeat. Red letters buzzed and hummed, casting an eerie glow across the gravel parking lot, where pickup trucks sat in crooked rows, their owners inside drowning their troubles in cheap whiskey and cheaper beer. It was a Thursday night in Millbrook, a forgotten industrial town where the factories had closed a decade ago, and hope had followed them out the door. The air smelled like stale cigarette smoke, motor oil, and the kind of desperation that settles into a place when all the good jobs are gone and all that's left is anger looking for somewhere to land. Before we begin this story, let us know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. This story will challenge everything you think you know about judgment, courage, and what it really means to be a hero. Outside Riley's bar, in the shadows just beyond the reach of that flickering neon, a man sat huddled against the brick wall. His name was Marcus Sullivan, though most people in Millbrook just called him the homeless guy, or that bum by the bar, if they called him anything at all. Marcus was 53 years old, but he looked 70. His face was weathered like ancient leather, carved with lines that told stories of pain, loss, and survival. His gray beard hung in tangled knots, matted with dirt and the remnants of whatever food he'd managed to scrounge from the dumpsters behind the grocery store. He wore a threadbare army jacket, the patches long since faded, the fabric torn in places where the cold mountain wind cut through like knives. On his lap sat a cardboard sign, hand-lettered in shaky block print. Homeless vet. Anything helps. God bless. Beside him, a small backpack contained everything he owned in this world. A spare shirt, a tattered blanket, a photograph he couldn't bear to look at but couldn't throw away, and a small notebook where he sometimes wrote letters to people who would never read them. The parking lot was filling up now as the evening shift change brought workers from the warehouse and the remaining assembly plant. They parked their trucks, slammed their doors, and walked past Marcus without seeing him. Some had perfected the art of looking through homeless people as if they were ghosts. Others crossed to the far side of the parking lot, as if poverty might be contagious. A few dropped coins into his cup, quarters, dimes, pennies. Without making eye contact, the metallic clink the only acknowledgement of his existence. Marcus had been on these streets for 4 years now. For years since everything fell apart. For years since the nightmares from his tours in Iraq became unbearable. Since the VA hospital stopped returning his calls. Since his wife took their daughter and left him with divorce papers and a restraining order. For years since he lost his job, his apartment, and finally, his will to fight. The transition from decorated combat medic to invisible street dweller had been shockingly swift, like falling off a cliff he hadn't seen coming. But tonight felt different. Marcus could sense it in the air, in the way men moved through the parking lot with shoulders squared and fists clenched. There was electricity in the atmosphere, the kind that comes before a storm. Inside the bar, voices were getting louder, meaner. Through the grimy windows, Marcus could see shapes moving, bodies pressing together, the crowd energy building towards something inevitable. Then he saw them, motorcycles rolling into the lot, their engines a deep, steady thunder that made the ground vibrate. 7 bikes. All of them Harley-Davidsons, their chrome gleaming even in the weak light. The riders were big men, leather-clad and tattooed, wearing the distinctive 3-piece patches of the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. Their colors announced them, a skull wrapped in chains over the words Iron Brotherhood, with Michigan across the top rocker and Millbrook chapter across the bottom. Marcus watched as they parked their bikes in a tight row at the far end of the lot, movements synchronized like a military unit. The lead rider, a massive man with a gray beard that reached his chest and arms thick as tree trunks, swung off his bike first. The patch above his heart read President. The others followed his lead, removing helmets, stretching road-weary muscles. They moved with the confidence of men who knew exactly who they were and didn't apologize for it. Marcus had seen the Iron Brotherhood around town before. They ran a motorcycle repair shop on the industrial side of Millbrook, kept to themselves mostly, did charity rides for veterans occasionally. People crossed the street when they saw them coming, whispered about criminal connections and violent pasts, but Marcus had never seen them cause trouble. They just had that look, the look of men who'd been through enough to know when to walk away and when to stand their ground. The bikers walked past Marcus toward the bar entrance. The president, whose road name was Reaper, slowed for just a moment, his dark eyes meeting Marcus's. There was recognition there, not of Marcus specifically, but of the type of man he was. Reaper had seen plenty of broken veterans in his time. He'd been one himself before he found the Brotherhood. He nodded once, a gesture so small most people would have missed it, but Marcus caught it. A nod between soldiers. A moment of acknowledgement in a world that had forgotten them both. Then Reaper and his brothers disappeared into Riley's bar, and Marcus was alone again with the cold and the dark and the growing sense that tonight was going to be different. Inside the bar, the Iron Brotherhood settled into a back corner booth, their presence immediately noted by the regular crowd. Riley's wasn't the kind of place that attracted bikers usually. It was a working man's dive, populated by tired factory workers, unemployed laborers, and the kind of men who drank to forget rather than to celebrate. The atmosphere shifted when the bikers entered, conversations dropping to murmurs, eyes tracking their movements with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. Reaper ordered a round of beers from the waitress, a middle-aged woman named Sheila who'd been working at Riley's since before the factories closed. She brought their drinks with a tight smile, collected her tip, and moved away quickly. The bikers weren't there for trouble. They'd just finished a long ride from a regional meeting in Detroit and needed a place to wet their throats before heading home. It should have been a quiet night, a few beers, some road stories, then back to their respective homes and families. But fate had other plans. At the bar, three men were getting progressively drunker and progressively louder. Their ringleader was a thick-necked man in his 30s named Derek Sutton, a former high school football star whose glory days were 20 years behind him and whose bitterness had been fermenting ever since. Derek worked at the warehouse when he wasn't getting fired for showing up drunk, lived in his mother's basement, and spent his nights at Riley's reliving his one touchdown in the state championship game to anyone who'd listen. His companions were cut from similar cloth. Carl, a wiry man with nervous hands and a cocaine habit he pretended was under control, and Tommy, who'd done 2 years for assault and still wore his prison muscles like a badge of honor. Together, they were a toxic combination of resentment, chemical courage, and violent potential looking for an outlet. "Did you see that homeless piece of shit outside?" Derek's voice carried across the bar, slurred but aggressive. Just sitting there with his hand out like the world owes him something. Carl snickered. Probably spent his last dollar on drugs. "They're all junkies, those homeless guys." "Says he's a veteran," Tommy added, his lip curling. "I bet he never even served. Just wearing that jacket for sympathy." From their booth in the corner, the Iron Brotherhood heard every word. Reaper's jaw tightened, and his second-in-command, a man they called Chains for the lengths of chain he wore wrapped around his belt, met his president's eyes. They'd both served, Reaper in the Marines, Chains in the Army. They knew what it cost to put on a uniform, and they knew how the country treated its veterans when they came home broken. But they also knew their code. The Iron Brotherhood wasn't a gang, wasn't about random violence or vigilante justice. They had rules, protocols, a structure that separated them from the criminal outfits that gave motorcycle clubs a bad name. You didn't jump into situations without understanding them first. You didn't throw fists just because someone was running their mouth. You assessed, you observed, and you acted with purpose. So they watched, they listened, and they waited. Outside, the temperature was dropping fast. Marcus pulled his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. His cup had collected maybe $7 in change over the past 3 hours, enough for a meal at the soup kitchen tomorrow if they were still serving, or maybe a coffee and a donut from the gas station down the road. He counted the money by the light of the neon sign, his fingers stiff with cold, each coin representing someone's fleeting moment of compassion in a town that had mostly run out of that particular resource. He didn't hear them coming until they were almost on top of him. Derek kicked Marcus's cup first, sending coins scattering across the gravel like silver rain. The sound brought Marcus's head up sharply, his military instincts flaring even after all these years. Well, Derek swayed slightly, his eyes red from whiskey and whatever else he'd consumed. "If it isn't our local charity case." Marcus had been here before. He'd learned that engaging with drunk, angry men only made things worse. He started gathering his scattered coins, his movements slow and deliberate, trying not to seem threatening, trying to be invisible again. "Hey," Derek's voice sharpened. "I'm talking to you, you piece of shit." Carl giggled nervously, that high-pitched laugh of someone who knows they're about to witness something terrible but lacks the courage to stop it. Tommy moved to block Marcus's escape route, his prison-learned instincts for violence coming back easily. "You a real veteran?" Derek demanded, kicking Marcus's sign away. "Or just some faker wearing a jacket you pulled from a donation bin?" Marcus's voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet, rough from lack of use. "I served 2 tours, Iraq. Combat medic." "Bullshit," Derek spat. "Real veterans don't end up like this. Real veterans have pride, have dignity. You're just a bum looking for a handout." Inside the bar, through the window, Reaper watched the scene developing. His brothers were tense, waiting for his signal. Every instinct screamed at them to go out there, to put these punks in their place, to protect a fellow veteran who couldn't protect himself. But Reaper held up a hand. "Wait, because this was a test, not of Marcus, but of Derek and his friends." Reaper needed to see how far they'd go, what they were truly capable of. Sometimes you learn more about people by watching what they do when they think no one's looking than you ever could by intervening early. And there was something else, something Reaper had noticed that the others hadn't yet. Marcus wasn't afraid. Resigned, yes. Tired, certainly. But not afraid. And that told Reaper this veteran had been through worse than 3 drunk idiots in a parking lot. "Please," Marcus said, his hands up in a placating gesture. "I don't want any trouble." Too late for that. Derek reached down and grabbed Marcus's backpack, ripping it from his grasp. He upended it, dumping Marcus's meager possessions onto the ground. The photograph fell out, fluttering in the breeze. A picture of a younger Marcus in his dress uniform, standing beside a woman and a little girl, all of them smiling like they believed in forever. Marcus lunged for the photograph, but Derek was faster, stomping his boot down on it, grinding it into the gravel. "What's this? Your fake family? Did you Photoshop yourself into this picture? Pretend you had people who loved you?" Something shifted in Marcus's eyes. The resignation hardened into something else. His voice, when he spoke, carried the steel of a man who'd faced down armed insurgents in Fallujah. "That's my daughter. And you're going to take your foot off that photograph. Now." Derek laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Or what, old man? You going to fight me?" Marcus tried to stand, his movements stiff from sitting in the cold, from old injuries that never healed right. He got one foot under him before Derek's fist caught him in the stomach, doubling him over. The punch was brutal, delivered with the full force of Derek's former football player strength. "Stay down," Derek snarled. But Marcus couldn't. That photograph was all he had left of the life he'd lost, of the daughter who didn't speak to him anymore, of the man he used to be. He struggled to his feet again, swaying, his hands up in a fighting stance that was 20 years out of practice. "Tough guy, huh?" Derek hit him again, this time in the face. Marcus's head snapped back, blood spraying from his split lip. He staggered, but didn't fall. Inside the bar, chains started to rise, but Reaper's hand shot out, gripping his brother's arm. "Not yet," Reaper said quietly, his eyes never leaving the scene outside. "Boss, they're killing him," Chains protested. "Not yet," Reaper repeated, his voice like stone, because Reaper saw what the others didn't. He saw the way Marcus kept getting up. He saw the determination in those old soldiers' eyes. And he saw Derek and his friends revealing exactly who they were. Cowards who found their courage in numbers and alcohol. Bullies who picked fights with men who couldn't fight back. The kind of men who talked tough, but folded when faced with real opposition. Derek kicked Marcus in the ribs, a sickening crack echoing across the parking lot. Marcus went down hard this time, gasping for air. Carl joined in then, his nervous energy finding an outlet in violence, kicking at Marcus's back while Tommy laughed and pulled out his phone to record it. "This is going on social media," Tommy cackled. "Homeless vet gets what he deserves." They kicked him again and again. Marcus curled into a fetal position, his arms protecting his head, that old combat training telling him how to minimize damage, how to survive. Each impact was a burst of pain and humiliation. But somewhere beneath it all, Marcus felt something else, a spark of the man he used to be, the Marine who'd run into gunfire to save wounded soldiers, the man who'd believed in honor and duty and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably less than 2 minutes, Derek stepped back, breathing hard, his knuckles bloody. "That's what you get, you worthless piece of shit. Stay down. Stay in the gutter where you belong." The 3 of them walked away, their laughter echoing across the parking lot as they climbed into Derek's truck and peeled out, gravel spraying. The parking lot fell silent except for Marcus's labored breathing and the quiet hum of the neon sign. Inside Riley's bar, the Iron Brotherhood watched them go, memorizing the license plate, the faces, every detail. Then, as one, they stood. Now, Chains asked. Now, Reaper confirmed. But not the way you think. They walked out of the bar, 7 large men in leather and patches, their boots heavy on the gravel. Other patrons followed them outside, curious, sensing that something significant was about to happen. But instead of chasing after Derek's truck, instead of the violence everyone expected, Reaper walked directly to where Marcus lay bleeding in the parking lot. He knelt down slowly, his bulk settling with surprising gentleness next to the broken man. "Marine," he said quietly, "can you hear me?" Marcus's eyes fluttered open, one already swelling shut. Through the blood and pain, he managed a weak nod. "I'm going to need you to trust me," Reaper said. "My brothers and I, we saw what happened. All of it. And we're going to make it right. But not the way you might think. You understand." Marcus tried to speak, but his jaw wouldn't work right. Blood filled his mouth where his teeth had cut the inside of his cheek. But his eyes, those old soldier's eyes, met Reaper's with understanding. Chains was already calling 911, his voice calm and professional as he reported an assault. Another brother, a man they called Doc, because he'd been a paramedic before joining the club, knelt on Marcus's other side, gently checking his injuries with practiced hands. "Possible broken ribs," Doc announced. "Definitely needs a hospital. But he'll live." Reaper carefully gathered Marcus's scattered possessions, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he collected the coins, the spare shirt, the tattered blanket. He picked up the photograph, now dirty and creased, and looked at it for a long moment before carefully placing it in Marcus's still open hand. "Your daughter," Reaper said. "She's beautiful." "How old?" Marcus's fingers closed around the photograph, tears mixing with the blood on his face. He couldn't speak, but he held up 8 fingers. 8 years old in this picture, Reaper nodded. "How old is she now?" Marcus managed to croak out one word. 12. "You haven't seen her in 4 years, Reaper stated. It wasn't a question. He'd seen that look before, the particular grief of a father separated from his child. "But you still carry her picture everywhere." Marcus nodded, more tears falling. The physical pain was nothing compared to the ache of that loss, the hole where his daughter used to be. The ambulance arrived, its sirens cutting through the night. Paramedics rushed over with their equipment, and Doc stepped back to give them room, but he stayed close, watching their work with a professional's eye. The police came next, 2 officers who took one look at the Iron Brotherhood and immediately got defensive. "What happened here?" the senior officer demanded, his hand resting near his service weapon. Reaper stood slowly, his movements deliberately non-threatening. "Officer, my name is Kane Mitchell. My brothers and I witnessed an assault on this veteran. We called it in, provided first aid, and waited for you to arrive. We have video evidence, witness statements, and the license plate of the truck that fled the scene." The officer blinked, clearly expecting a different story. "You called it in? That's what law-abiding citizens do when they witness a crime," Reaper replied evenly. "Isn't it?" As the paramedics loaded Marcus onto a stretcher, Reaper leaned in close one more time. "I need you to listen carefully, Marine. What we're about to do, it's going to take 20 minutes. Maybe less. But when it's done, everything changes. For you, for them, for this whole damn town. You trust me." Marcus, strapped to the stretcher, his vision swimming, managed to nod one more time. He didn't understand, couldn't understand, but something in Reaper's voice demanded trust, and Marcus had spent his life trusting officers who led him into combat. This felt like that. "Good," Reaper said, "because you're not ending your story as a victim. Not on my watch." As the ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, the Iron Brotherhood gathered by their motorcycles. The crowd from the bar watched warily, expecting violence, expecting the bikers to roar off in pursuit of Derek's truck. But Reaper surprised them again. "Chains, I need you and Bear to follow that ambulance to the hospital. Stay with the Marine, make sure he gets proper care, make sure the doctors know he's not alone." Chains and Bear, a quiet giant of a man with gentle eyes, nodded and mounted their bikes immediately. "Doc, I need you to pull up everything you can find on Derek Sutton, Carl Myers, and Tommy Jackson. Where they live, where they work, who they associate with, priors, everything. Doc pulled out his phone, his fingers already flying across the screen. On it, boss. Reaper turned to the remaining brothers. The rest of you, we've got work to do. And we've got exactly 20 minutes to do it. What are we doing, boss? Asked Razor, the youngest member of the chapter, his tattooed knuckles flexing with anticipation. Reaper's smile was cold, calculating, the expression of a man who'd learned that true power came not from violence, but from strategic application of pressure at exactly the right points. We're going to give those boys a lesson in consequences. But more than that, we're going to change a man's life. Because that's what brotherhood means. The Iron Brotherhood split up, each with specific tasks, moving with military precision. They had 20 minutes to gather information, make phone calls, cash in favors, and set in motion a series of events that would ripple through Millbrook like an earthquake. 20 minutes to prove that justice didn't always come from fists, and that real power belonged to those who knew how to use the systems everyone else ignored. As his brothers scattered, Reaper stood alone in the parking lot for a moment, looking at the spot where Marcus had lain bleeding. He knelt down and picked up something the paramedics had missed. Marcus's small notebook, the one where he wrote letters no one would read. Reaper opened it carefully, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle with the worn pages. The first entry stopped him cold. It was addressed to Sarah, presumably Marcus's daughter, and dated just 3 days ago. Dear Sarah, today I saw a girl who looked like you might look now. She had your mother's eyes, and that same way of tilting her head when she laughs. I wanted to tell her she reminded me of my daughter, but I didn't want to scare her. I know I look frightening now, all beard and dirt and broken pieces. But I want you to know that every day, even on the worst days, I think about you. I think about the last time I tucked you into bed, the last time you called me daddy, the last time your small hand fit perfectly in mine. I failed you, baby girl. I failed as a husband, as a father, as a man. But I never stopped loving you. I never will. Even if you never read these words, even if I never see you again, you are the reason I keep breathing. You are my light in all this darkness. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Wherever you are, I hope you're happy. I hope you're safe. I hope someday you can forgive me. Your father, who loves you always, Marcus. Reaper closed the notebook, his jaw tight, his eyes harder than steel. He tucked it carefully into his jacket pocket. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call that would start everything in motion. Jimmy, he said when the line connected. It's Reaper. I need a favor, and I need it fast. You still work at the VA hospital? A pause as he listened. Good. I'm sending you a name, Marcus Sullivan. Combat medic, 2 tours Iraq. I need you to pull his records, find out what benefits he's entitled to, why he's not getting them, and fix it. Tonight. Another pause. I don't care what strings you have to pull, brother. This is one of ours, and he's been left behind too long. The second call went to a woman named Patricia Chun, a social worker who specialized in family reunification cases. Patricia, Kane Mitchell here. Remember when my club fixed your car for free last winter? Time to call in that favor. I've got a veteran who's been separated from his daughter for 4 years. I need you to investigate the case, see if there's any path to supervised visitation, maybe more. His name is Marcus Sullivan. The third call was to an old Marine Corps buddy who now worked as a private investigator. Jake, how fast can you build me a complete dossier on 3 individuals? Reaper rattled off the names and what little information he had. I need to know everything. Criminal histories, outstanding warrants, where they buy their drugs, who they owe money to, every skeleton in every closet. And I need it in 15 minutes. The calls continued. To a lawyer who specialized in assault cases and owed the Iron Brotherhood for protection during a particularly nasty divorce. To a local news reporter who'd been looking for a story about veteran homelessness and had approached the club about doing a feature. To the manager of a veteran-owned construction company that had worked with the Iron Brotherhood on charity builds. To the president of the local VFW post who'd served with Reaper in Desert Storm. Each call was a thread, and Reaper was weaving them together into a net that would catch Derek, Carl, and Tommy in ways they'd never see coming. But more than that, he was building a support structure for Marcus, a framework that would lift the broken veteran out of the gutter and give him a fighting chance at reclaiming his life. 12 minutes had passed when Doc approached with his phone, his expression grim. Boss, you need to see this. Reaper looked at the screen, his eyes scanning rapidly. Derek Sutton had 2 prior assault charges, both dismissed when witnesses mysteriously refused to testify. Carl Myers had a record of drug possession and distribution, currently on probation. Tommy Jackson had done 2 years for assault and battery, been released 6 months ago, and was already violating his parole by associating with known criminals and failing his drug tests. They're predators, Doc said quietly. This isn't their first time. Marcus was just their latest victim. Was, Reaper repeated, emphasis on the past tense. Not anymore. His phone buzzed. A text from Jake, his PI buddy, with an attachment. Reaper opened it, and his expression shifted into something that made even Doc take a step back. Well, Reaper murmured. Isn't this interesting? 15 minutes had elapsed when Razor came running back, slightly out of breath. Boss, I found them. They went to the Golden Star Bar on the east side. They're inside right now, bragging about what they did, showing that video to anyone who'll watch. Reaper nodded slowly. Perfect. Everyone mount up. It's time. The remaining Iron Brotherhood members climbed onto their motorcycles, engines roaring to life. But they didn't head toward the Golden Star Bar. Instead, Reaper led them in the opposite direction, toward the hospital where Marcus was being treated. At the hospital, Chains and Bear stood guard outside Marcus's room as doctors worked. A police officer had taken a preliminary statement, but Marcus had been heavily sedated for the pain, his words slurred and confused. The cops seemed ready to write it off as just another homeless guy who got into a fight, probably over drugs or alcohol, not worth their time to investigate properly. Then Reaper arrived, and everything changed. He walked past the police with barely a glance, his brothers falling into formation behind him. The cops moved to stop them, but Reaper simply handed over a business card. Kane Mitchell, Iron Brotherhood MC. We're witnesses to the assault on the veteran in room 204. Here's video evidence from multiple angles. He held up a tablet showing clear footage of the entire attack, timestamps visible, Derek's face unmistakable. Here's a signed statement from 7 witnesses, all of whom are willing to testify. And here's the contact information for the veteran's pro bono attorney, who'll be filing charges first thing tomorrow morning. The police officers looked at each other, then at the tablet, then at the line of bikers filling the hallway. This wasn't what they'd expected at all. We also have information, Reaper continued, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous, that suggests this wasn't an isolated incident. Derek Sutton and his associates have a pattern of targeting vulnerable individuals. Homeless people, primarily. People they thought wouldn't fight back, wouldn't press charges, wouldn't matter to anyone. They were wrong. He stepped closer to the senior officer, his presence overwhelming despite his calm demeanor. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to open a proper investigation. You're going to arrest all 3 of them tonight. And you're going to make sure the charges stick this time, because if they don't, Reaper let the sentence hang, not making a threat, just stating a fact. The Iron Brotherhood has connections all over this state. We know judges, prosecutors, reporters, veterans advocacy groups. We will make sure this story gets told, properly, completely. You understand me? The officer, to his credit, held his ground. Are you threatening a police officer? No, sir. Reaper's smile was thin. I'm informing you that justice will be served, one way or another. We prefer to work within the system, but we're prepared to go around it if necessary. Before the officer could respond, a woman's voice cut through the tension. No need for that. Patricia Chun, the social worker, approached with a briefcase and a determined expression. I'm here representing Mr. Sullivan's interests, and I've already been in contact with the district attorney's office. They're very interested in this case, especially given Mr. Sullivan's status as a disabled veteran and the defendant's prior histories. The officer looked overwhelmed, trapped between the bikers on one side and the social worker on the other, with a case that was rapidly becoming more complicated than a simple bar fight. Reaper glanced at Patricia, who gave him the slightest nod. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Inside the hospital room, Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, the morphine making everything soft and distant. He was aware of voices, of people moving around him, but couldn't quite focus on what was happening. His ribs were wrapped tightly, 2 broken, 3 cracked. His face was a mass of bruises and stitches, but the doctors said he'd recover, given time and proper care. It was the proper care part that had always been the problem. Reaper entered the room quietly, his bulk somehow gentle in the sterile space. He pulled up a chair next to Marcus's bed and waited for the veteran's eyes to clear enough to focus. "Hey, Marine," Reaper said softly. "How you feeling?" Marcus tried to speak, but his swollen jaw made it difficult. "Like, got hit by truck." "Close enough," Reaper agreed. "But you're alive, and you're getting treatment, and those boys who did this to you are about to have a very bad night." Marcus's good eye widened slightly. "You didn't touch them," Reaper assured him. "Didn't have to. See, that's the thing about real power, Marine. It's not about who can hit the hardest. It's about who can make the phone calls, pull the strings, activate the networks. My brothers and I, we've been around long enough to build some connections. And tonight, we're cashing in a lot of favors. For you." "Why?" Marcus managed to whisper. "Don't know me." Reaper leaned back in his chair, his scarred hands folded across his chest. "You know what I saw tonight, when those cowards were kicking you? I saw a Marine who kept getting back up. Every time they knocked you down, you tried to stand. You know why that matters." Marcus shook his head slightly, the movement clearly painful. "Because it means you haven't given up," Reaper said. "You're homeless, you're broken, you're bleeding in a parking lot, and you still won't stay down. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are under all the dirt and desperation. You're still a fighter. You've just forgotten how to win." He reached into his jacket and pulled out Marcus's notebook, placing it carefully on the bedside table. "I read one of your letters. To your daughter, Sarah. You don't have to say anything. I know it's private. But I want you to know that we're working on that too." Marcus's eye filled with tears. "Sarah, she's better, without me." "Maybe," Reaper said bluntly. "Or maybe she's a 12-year-old girl who's been without her father for 4 years and wonders every day if he ever thinks about her. Kids don't understand addiction, depression, PTSD. They just know their daddy's gone. But here's the thing, you're still writing to her. Every few days, like clockwork. That means part of you still believes there's hope." "No hope," Marcus whispered. "Lost everything." "Not yet." Reaper stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across the bed. "Because in about 5 minutes, a lot of things are going to start changing. The VA is reopening your case. Turns out there was a clerical error that prevented you from getting benefits you're entitled to. You've got 4 years of back pay coming, plus full disability. A social worker is already investigating your family situation, and she's good at what she does. A lawyer is taking your assault case pro bono, and he doesn't lose. And my brothers and I are making sure you've got somewhere to go when you get out of here." Marcus stared at him, unable to process what he was hearing. "This, not real. Dreaming. It's real," Reaper promised. "Because 20 minutes ago, I made a choice. I could have let my brothers go beat those boys into the pavement. Would have been easy, would have felt good. But that wouldn't have changed anything for you. So instead, we did something different. We went to war, Marine. Not with fists, but with phone calls and connections and every bit of influence we've built up over the years. And we're winning." His phone buzzed. Reaper checked it and smiled, the expression predatory. "Right on time. Derek Sutton, Carl Myers, and Tommy Jackson are all in custody. Turns out Tommy had a warrant he didn't know about. His parole officer got an anonymous tip that he was violating. Derek's truck was pulled over for a broken taillight, and the officer happened to find evidence of the assault in plain view. And Carl, well, let's just say he made some poor choices about what he was carrying in his pockets when the police arrived." Marcus's eye widened. "You did that." "I told you," Reaper said. "Phone calls and connections. My club, we're not angels. Most of us have records, have done things we're not proud of. But we take care of our own, and tonight, you became one of ours. Whether you want it or not." Another buzz. Reaper checked his phone again. And there it is. Local news is picking up the story. Disabled veteran brutally attacked. Community rallies. By morning, this'll be everywhere. Derek and his buddies wanted to put you on social media? Well, they got their wish. Their faces are about to be famous for all the wrong reasons. Marcus tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "Please, don't want publicity." "I know you don't," Reaper said gently, easing him back down. "But here's the reality. You've been invisible for 4 years. The system forgot about you. The VA lost your paperwork. Your community walked past you every single day. Invisibility is what got you here. So we're making you visible, Marine. Not as a victim, not as a pity case, but as a veteran who deserves better. As a father who never stopped loving his daughter. As a man who kept getting back up no matter how many times life knocked him down." The door opened, and Patricia Chun entered with a thick folder. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Patricia Chun. I specialize in family reunification cases, and I've been reviewing your situation with your ex-wife and daughter." She pulled up a chair, her expression professionally warm. "I'm not going to lie to you. It's complicated. There's a restraining order, there's documented substance abuse, there are legitimate concerns. But I've also found some things in your favor. You've been sober for 2 years based on your medical records. You've consistently tried to maintain contact, albeit from a distance. And most importantly, your daughter has been asking about you." Marcus's good eye widened, tears spilling over. "Sarah asks." Patricia nodded. "Your ex-wife mentioned it in the court documents. Sarah asks where you are, why you left, if you still love her. Your wife has been telling her that you're sick, that you're getting better, that maybe someday you'll be well enough to visit. She's left the door open, Mr. Sullivan. We just need to get you through it. I'm this." Marcus gestured weakly at his battered body, his hospital gown, the 4 tubes running into his arms. "Can't let her see me." "You're right," Patricia agreed. "Not like this. But Mr. Mitchell has informed me that the Iron Brotherhood is prepared to sponsor you through a residential treatment program. PTSD therapy, physical rehabilitation, job training, the whole package. It'll take time, probably 6 months minimum. But at the end of it, you'll be healthy, stable, employed, and housed. And then we can talk about supervised visitation." Marcus was crying openly now, his battered face a mask of disbelief and desperate hope. "Why? Why do all this?" Reaper answered, his voice rough with emotion he rarely showed. "Because 3 years ago, I was where you are now. Different details, same story. Lost my family, lost my purpose, was about 2 days away from eating a bullet. My brothers in this club, they didn't ask why I was worth saving. They just saved me. Gave me a reason to get up in the morning. Gave me a family when my blood relatives had written me off. And they told me that someday, I'd have a chance to pay it forward. Tonight's that night." He stood, straightening his leather vest with its president's patch. "So here's what happens next, Marine. You focus on healing. We'll handle everything else. The legal stuff, the VA stuff, the housing, all of it. Your only job is to get better, to do the therapy, to work the program. In 6 months, we're going to get you ready to see your daughter again. And when that day comes, you're going to walk in there as a man she can be proud of, not the broken ghost you are now. You understand me?" Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. For the first time in 4 years, he felt something other than despair. It was terrifying and fragile, but it was there. Hope. Reaper reached down and squeezed Marcus's shoulder gently. "Get some rest, Marine. Tomorrow, the real work begins. But tonight, you can sleep knowing you're not alone anymore. You've got brothers watching your back." As Reaper turned to leave, Marcus found his voice one more time. "Wait, the photograph. My daughter's picture." Derek stepped on it. Reaper pulled something from his jacket pocket. The photograph, now cleaned and carefully placed in a small protective sleeve. "Doc's wife runs a photo restoration business. She's already working on a cleaned-up version. This one's a little rough, but it's yours." He placed it in Marcus's hand, the veteran's fingers closing around it like a lifeline. "Thank you," Marcus whispered, the words entirely inadequate for what he was feeling. "Thank me by showing up," Reaper said simply. "For yourself. For your daughter. For every veteran out there who's still fighting battles no one sees. Show up and don't quit. That's all I ask." He walked out of the room, his brothers falling into step behind him. In the hallway, the police were finishing their paperwork, the social worker was making more calls, and the machinery of justice and redemption was grinding into motion. 20 minutes had turned into an hour, but the work was just beginning. Outside the hospital, the Iron Brotherhood gathered by their motorcycles. The night air was cold, but the sky was clearing, stars visible for the first time in days. Chains approached Reaper, his expression thoughtful. "Boss, we just spent a lot of political capital on one guy. Some of the brothers are asking, was it worth it?" Reaper looked back at the hospital, at the window where Marcus's room glowed with soft light. "When I was at my lowest, somebody pulled me out. Didn't ask if I was worth it, didn't demand anything in return. Just extended a hand and wouldn't let go until I grabbed it. That debt doesn't get repaid, it gets passed forward. Tonight, we passed it forward. And maybe, someday, Marcus will do the same for someone else. That's how brotherhood works. That's how we change the world, one broken person at a time." He swung onto his bike, the engine rumbling to life. Besides, he added with a grim smile, we're not done yet. Derek, Carl, and Tommy are in custody, but I want to make sure they understand exactly why their lives just fell apart. Razor, you ready for phase 2? Razor grinned, his young face eager. Oh yeah, boss. I've been saving this for the right moment. Phase 2 was simple but devastating. Tommy Jackson's parole officer received detailed documentation of every violation. The drugs, the association with known criminals, the assault that violated his early release terms. Carl Meyer's probation officer got similar evidence, along with testimony from witnesses who'd seen him dealing. And Derek Sutton's employer, the warehouse where he worked, received a copy of the assault video along with information about his previous violent incidents that he'd failed to disclose on his employment application. By morning, all 3 men would be facing serious legal consequences. Tommy would be back in prison within the week. Carl would lose his probation deal and serve his suspended sentence. And Derek would be unemployed, facing assault charges with multiple witnesses, and dealing with the social stigma of being the man who beat up a homeless veteran. But there was one more element to phase 2, and this was the part that made Reaper smile darkly. The video Tommy had taken, the one where he'd laughed about putting a homeless vet beating on social media, had been recovered from his phone by police. And somehow, mysteriously, it had been leaked to the local news along with the men's full names, addresses, and criminal histories. By the time Derek, Carl, and Tommy made bail, if they could make bail, their faces would be plastered across every news outlet in the state. Their neighbors would know what they'd done. Their families would be ashamed. Their friends would distance themselves. And for the rest of their lives, whenever anyone Googled their names, the first thing that would come up would be the story of how they'd brutally attacked a defenseless veteran. Justice isn't always immediate, Reaper said as he watched Razor upload the final pieces of evidence to the news station's anonymous tip line. But it's thorough if you know how to work the system. The Iron Brotherhood rode through the night, their engines a chorus of power and purpose. They'd started the evening expecting just a quiet beer after a long ride. Instead, they'd found a purpose, a mission, and a brother who needed them. And in doing so, they'd proven that justice didn't always come from violence, that power wasn't about who could hit the hardest, and that real change happened when good people refused to look away. 6 months passed like a river cutting through stone, slowly, inevitably, changing everything in its path. The seasons turned from the bitter cold of January to the tentative warmth of early summer. And in that time, Marcus Sullivan transformed in ways that seemed impossible to anyone who'd known him as the homeless man outside Riley's bar. The residential treatment facility where the Iron Brotherhood had placed him was 40 miles outside Millbrook, tucked into the woods where the world felt quiet and safe. It was a place specifically for veterans, run by veterans, funded by a combination of VA programs and private donations. The Iron Brotherhood contributed generously, and in return, they got to visit whenever they wanted, checking on their newest brother's progress. The first month was hell. Marcus went through medical detox for the alcohol he'd used to numb the pain, through psychiatric evaluations that forced him to confront his PTSD, through physical therapy for injuries he'd let go untreated for years. There were days he wanted to leave, to run back to the familiar misery of the streets. But every time he wavered, a member of the Iron Brotherhood would show up. Sometimes it was Reaper, sitting quietly in the common room, not saying much, just being present. Sometimes it was Doc, bringing medical supplies and checking on Marcus's healing ribs. Sometimes it was Chains, who'd also struggled with PTSD and could talk about the nightmares without judgment. And sometimes it was younger members like Razor, who'd bring news from the outside world, reminding Marcus that life was still happening, still waiting for him to rejoin it. The therapy was brutal in its honesty. Marcus had to talk about things he'd buried deep, the friends he'd lost in Iraq, the faces of people he couldn't save, the moment his marriage fell apart when his wife found him in the garage with a bottle of pills and a suicide note. He had to confront the fact that he'd been self-medicating with alcohol, that he'd pushed away everyone who tried to help, that he'd chosen the streets over accepting treatment because somewhere deep inside, he believed he deserved to suffer. But slowly, painfully, Marcus started to heal. The nightmares didn't stop entirely, but he learned techniques to manage them. The guilt didn't disappear, but he learned to carry it without being crushed. The shame of what he'd become began to transform into determination about who he could still be. Physical therapy rebuilt muscles that had atrophied. Occupational therapy taught him skills he could use in civilian employment. And throughout it all, Marcus wrote letters to his daughter Sarah, though he still didn't send them. Not yet. Not until he was ready. Until he was whole enough to be the father she deserved. In March, 3 months into his treatment, Patricia Chun arranged a phone call. It was supervised, carefully controlled, with Sarah's therapist and mother present. Marcus's hands shook so hard, he could barely hold the phone. Hello. His voice cracked on the single word. There was a pause, then a young girl's voice, uncertain and small. Daddy. Marcus closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. Hi, baby girl. It's me. Where have you been? Sarah asked, not accusatory, just confused. Mom said you were sick. I was, Marcus managed. I was very sick. But I'm getting better now. I'm in a hospital where they help people like me. Are you coming home? The question was a knife to his heart. Not yet, sweetheart. I need to get all the way better first. But I'm trying, I promise I'm trying. They talked for 15 minutes, about school, about her friends, about the new puppy her mother had gotten her. Sarah told him about the science fair where she'd built a volcano, about learning to play the clarinet, about missing him even though she couldn't quite remember what he looked like anymore. I carry your picture with me every day, Marcus told her. You're 8 years old in it, wearing your pink dress with the flowers. I remember that dress. Sarah's voice brightened. I was in 2nd grade. I'm in 6th grade now, Daddy. I'm almost as tall as Mom. When the call ended, Marcus sat in his room for an hour, holding the phone like it was made of gold. For the first time in 4 years, he'd spoken to his daughter. She'd called him Daddy. She remembered him. She'd asked when he was coming home. That night, for the first time since entering treatment, Marcus slept through the whole night without waking in a panic. The legal proceedings against Derek, Carl, and Tommy moved forward with the grinding inevitability of bureaucracy. All 3 had been denied bail due to their flight risk and history of intimidating witnesses. They sat in county jail, watching their lives unravel from behind bars. The video had gone viral, just as Reaper had planned. Thugs brutally attack homeless veteran, played on loop across social media, each share accompanied by outraged comments and demands for justice. Derek's mother was harassed so badly she had to move. Carl's girlfriend left him, taking their kid. Tommy's prison buddies saw the video and decided a man who beat up homeless vets wasn't someone they wanted to associate with. Even criminals have standards. The trial was set for June. The prosecutor, energized by the public attention and the ironclad evidence, was pushing for maximum sentences. Derek faced 8 to 15 years for aggravated assault. Carl was looking at similar time once his probation violation was factored in. Tommy, as a repeat offender, could get 20 to 30. But there was one more twist, and it came from an unexpected source. In May, Marcus received a visit from a lawyer representing Derek Sutton. The man was nervous, clearly uncomfortable with his mission. Mr. Sullivan, my client would like to speak with you. Marcus, now clean-shaven and clear-eyed, wearing donated clothes that actually fit, looked nothing like the man who'd been beaten in that parking lot. Why would I want to speak to him? He wants to apologize, the lawyer said. He understands that doesn't change anything, but he's realized some things in jail. About his life, his choices, who he became. And he wanted you to know that he's sorry. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The old Marcus, the broken one, would have either raged or retreated. But the new Marcus, the one who'd been doing therapy and examining his own mistakes, understood something the old Marcus couldn't have grasped. Everyone's fighting battles you can't see. Set it up, Marcus said finally. I'll meet with him, but I'm bringing someone with me. The someone was Reaper, who drove Marcus to the county jail on a bright morning in late May. They sat across from Derek in a small meeting room, a thick glass partition separating them. Derek looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His skin was pale from months without sunlight, and his eyes held a kind of desperate awareness that comes from having too much time to think. I don't expect you to forgive me. Derek started, his voice hoarse. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I needed to look you in the face and tell you I'm sorry. For what I did, for who I was, for everything. Marcus studied him without speaking, letting the silence stretch. Finally, he said, you know what the worst part was? Not the beating, not the pain. It was the way you looked at me like I wasn't even human. Like I was trash you could kick around for entertainment. Derek flinched. I know. I've thought about that every day since. And the thing is, I don't even know why I hated you so much. You never did anything to me. I was angry all the time, and you were there, and you were vulnerable, and I made you pay for everything wrong in my life. That's not an excuse, Reaper said flatly. I know, Derek agreed. There is no excuse. But I wanted him to know that I see it now. I see what I did, who I was. And if I ever get out of here, I'm never going to be that person again. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You want to know something? 6 months ago, I would have killed for the chance to hurt you back, to make you feel what you made me feel. But I've learned something since then. Revenge doesn't heal anything. It just creates more pain. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I don't hate you either. Because hate takes energy I need for other things. For healing, for rebuilding, for getting my daughter back. You took a lot from me that night. But you also gave me something, though you didn't mean to. What? Derek asked, confused. Marcus glanced at Reaper. You brought these men into my life. The Iron Brotherhood. They saw what you did to me. And instead of just beating you up like you probably deserved, they did something better. They saved me. They gave me a second chance. So in a weird way, your worst moment created my best chance at redemption. Derek's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve that kind of grace. No, Marcus agreed. You don't. But grace isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to be better than the situation demands. These men taught me that. As they left the jail, Reaper put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. That was a hell of a thing you just did, Marine. Had to, Marcus said. For me, not for him. Carrying that anger around. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I've spent too many years poisoning myself. Time to stop. They drove back to the treatment facility in comfortable silence, the motorcycle rumbling beneath them, the summer sun warm on their faces. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus felt something approaching peace. The day finally arrived in late June, hot and bright, the kind of day where the world feels full of possibilities. Marcus stood in front of the mirror in his new apartment, provided by veteran services and partially subsidized by the Iron Brotherhood, and barely recognized himself. Clean-shaven, hair cut short and neat, wearing new jeans and a button-up shirt that actually fit. His eyes, once hollow and defeated, were clear and focused. The man in the mirror looked like someone who'd been through hell but had somehow found his way back. Today was the day. Supervised visitation with Sarah. 2 hours in a neutral location with a therapist present. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Reaper arrived to drive him, the big biker looking almost civilized in his cleanest jeans and a simple black t-shirt with no club logos. You ready for this, Marine? Marcus took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. I'm terrified. Good, Reaper said. Means you care. Men who don't care aren't scared. You're scared because this matters. That's exactly how you should feel. The drive to the family services building took 20 minutes. Marcus's hands shook the entire way. He'd faced enemy fire in Fallujah, had run into buildings others were running out of, had held dying soldiers in his arms while mortars fell around them. But nothing had ever terrified him like the prospect of seeing his daughter after 4 years of absence. Patricia Chin met them in the parking lot, her professional warmth a steadying presence. Marcus, you look wonderful. How are you feeling? Like I'm about to jump out of an airplane without checking my parachute, he admitted. She smiled. That's normal. Just remember what we talked about in our prep sessions. This isn't about explaining everything or apologizing for everything or fixing everything all at once. This is just about being present, about letting Sarah see that you're still here, still her father, still trying. Can you do that? Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. They walked into the building together, Reaper staying in the waiting room, while Patricia led Marcus to a small, sunny room decorated with comfortable chairs and children's artwork. A therapist named Dr. Monroe was already there, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who specialized in family reunification. Sarah and her mother will be here in a few minutes, Dr. Monroe explained. Remember, this meeting is primarily for Sarah's benefit. We'll follow her lead on what she wants to talk about and how long she wants to stay. Your role is to be present, honest, and gentle. Think you can do that? Yes, ma'am, Marcus said, his military training keeping his voice steady even as his insides churned. Then the door opened, and time stopped. She was 12 now, no longer the 8-year-old from his photograph. Taller, her features more defined, her hair longer and pulled back in a ponytail. She wore jeans and a t-shirt with some band logo he didn't recognize. But her eyes, those were still his daughter's eyes, still holding that same curious intelligence that had asked him 1,000 questions about everything when she was little. Behind her came his ex-wife Jennifer, looking tired but determined. She met Marcus's eyes for a brief moment. Something complicated passing between them. Residual anger, yes, but also acknowledgement of the effort he'd made, the changes he'd achieved. "Hi, Sarah," Marcus said softly, staying seated so he wouldn't seem overwhelming. "You've gotten so tall." Sarah stood frozen in the doorway for a moment, studying him like he was a stranger. Which, Marcus realized painfully, he essentially was. She'd been 8 the last time she saw him. That was a lifetime ago in kid years. "You look different," Sarah said finally, her voice uncertain. "I thought you'd have a big beard." Marcus touched his smooth chin. "I shaved it. Wanted to look nice for you." "Oh." Sarah moved into the room slowly, like a cautious cat, and settled into a chair across from him. Jennifer sat beside her daughter, protective but not interfering. Dr. Monroe gently guided the conversation, asking Sarah about school, about her interests, giving her control of the interaction. Slowly, Sarah began to open up, talking about her science classes, about her clarinet lessons, about a book she was reading about marine biology, because she thought she might want to be a marine biologist someday. "That's amazing," Marcus said, genuine pride in his voice. "You always loved the ocean. Remember when we went to the beach and you collected all those shells?" Sarah's eyes lit up slightly. "I still have those. In a jar in my room." "Really?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "You kept them?" "Of course," Sarah said, like it was obvious. "You gave them to me." The conversation continued, tentative but real. Sarah asked where he'd been, and Marcus answered honestly, but age-appropriately. "I got sick, sweetheart. Not the kind of sick where you get a cold, but sick in my mind and my heart. I had nightmares from the war, and I tried to make them go away in bad ways that just made everything worse. And then I was living on the streets, and I felt really lost and really alone." "But you're better now?" Sarah asked, her voice small. "I'm getting better," Marcus said carefully. "I'm in a program that's helping me learn how to deal with the nightmares and the sadness. I have a place to live, and I have a job starting next week helping other veterans who are struggling. And I have friends, really good friends, who help me stay on track." "The motorcycle guys?" Sarah asked. "Mom told me about them." Marcus glanced at Jennifer, who nodded slightly. "Yes, the Iron Brotherhood. They're the ones who helped me when I was at my very lowest. They're good men, even if they look scary. Can I meet them?" Sarah asked, a hint of curiosity breaking through her caution. "If your mom says it's okay, absolutely," Marcus said. Jennifer spoke for the first time. "Maybe. Eventually. We'll see how things go." The 2 hours passed simultaneously, too fast and too slow. There were awkward silences, moments where Sarah retreated into uncertainty, times when Marcus struggled to find the right words. But there were also moments of connection, when Sarah laughed at something he said, when she showed him a picture on her phone of her puppy, when she tentatively asked if he'd be at her school concert next month. "I would love to be there," Marcus said, looking at Jennifer for permission. "We can discuss it," Jennifer said, but her tone was less hostile than he'd expected. Seeing him like this, clean, sober, genuinely trying, had clearly affected her. When the session ended, Dr. Monroe declared it a successful first visit. "Sarah, how did that feel for you?" Sarah thought about it seriously. "Weird. But good weird, I think. He's like Dad, but different. Like he used to be. Is that okay?" Dr. Monroe asked gently. "Yeah," Sarah said slowly. "I think it is." As they prepared to leave, Sarah did something that shattered Marcus completely. She walked over and hugged him quickly, barely a second of contact, but it was everything. "Bye, Dad," she whispered. Marcus hugged her back gently, careful not to hold too tight, not to scare her. "Bye, baby girl. Thank you for giving me a chance." After they left, Marcus sat in the room for a long moment, overwhelmed. Patricia and Dr. Monroe gave him space, understanding that sometimes emotions need room to breathe. When he finally emerged, Reaper stood up immediately, reading Marcus's face. "How'd it go?" Marcus couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face, but for the first time in forever, they were good tears. Tears of gratitude and hope and the beginning of healing. Reaper gripped his shoulder hard. "Come on, Marine. The brothers are waiting to hear how it went. They've been nervous as hell. At the Iron Brotherhood Clubhouse, the entire chapter had gathered. When Marcus walked in with Reaper, looking emotionally wrung out but somehow lighter, they erupted in cheers and questions. "She hugged me," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "After 4 years, my daughter hugged me and called me dad." Chains started a slow clap that the others joined. Doc pulled Marcus into a bear hug. Even the toughest members had suspiciously bright eyes. "You did it," Reaper said proudly. "You showed up, you did the work, you earned this moment. That's on you, Marine. We just opened the door. You walked through it." That night, they celebrated. Not with alcohol, because Marcus was sober and would stay that way, but with food and stories and the kind of brotherhood that transcends blood relation. Marcus sat in the middle of it all, surrounded by scarred, tattooed men who society feared and judged, and felt more at home than he had in years. Later, when things quieted down, Marcus found himself outside with Reaper, both of them looking up at the stars. "You know what the crazy thing is?" Marcus said. "If those guys hadn't attacked me, I'd probably still be sitting outside Riley's bar, slowly dying, too scared to ask for help. In the worst moment of my life, you guys found me. Or I found you. Or maybe we found each other. That's how it works," Reaper said. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. But that night, even getting beaten, you kept getting back up. That told me you still had fight in you. We just had to redirect it." "Why didn't you intervene immediately?" Marcus asked. It was a question that had been bothering him. "When they were kicking me, you could have stopped it faster." Reaper was quiet for a moment. "You want the honest truth?" "Always." "Because I needed to see who you were under the dirt and desperation," Reaper said. "If you'd stayed down, if you'd curled up and given up, I would have still helped. We'd have called the cops, gotten you to a hospital. But you kept getting up. Every time they knocked you down, you tried to stand. That's when I knew you were worth everything we were about to invest in you. Not because staying down makes you worthless, but because getting up meant you still believed in something, even if you didn't know what." He turned to face Marcus directly. "And I needed to let those boys reveal who they really were. If we'd stopped them after the first punch, they could have claimed it was a misunderstanding, a drunken mistake, whatever. But by letting it play out, they showed their true nature. Made the case against them ironclad. Sometimes you have to let people hang themselves with their own rope." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the brutal logic. "It worked. They're all going to prison. Justice takes many forms," Reaper said. "Sometimes it's a fist to the face. Sometimes it's a phone call to the right person. We chose the path that would change the most lives. Yours, theirs, and every other veteran out there who's struggling alone because they think no one cares." "The news coverage," Marcus said. "That was intentional too." "Every bit of it," Reaper confirmed. "Your story, disabled veteran beaten, bikers rally to help, community transformation, it's been picked up nationally. You know how many vets have reached out to the VA because of it? How many homeless people have asked for help? How many communities are looking at their invisible populations differently? You became a symbol, Marine. Not of victimhood, but of survival and redemption." Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility. "I never wanted to be famous." "You're not famous," Reaper said. "You're a reminder. Every time someone sees your story, they're reminded that homeless people are human beings with stories and struggles. That veterans deserve better than what we're giving them. That redemption is possible if someone cares enough to help. That's not fame. That's purpose." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars will overhead. Finally, Marcus said, "I want to do what you did for me. For other vets. Other people who are where I was." "I know," Reaper said. "Why do you think we got you that job at the Veteran Services Center? You start next week, helping homeless vets navigate the system, connect with resources, find their way back. Who better to do that than someone who's been through it?" Marcus felt tears prick his eyes again. "You've thought of everything." "Not everything," Reaper admitted. "There's one more thing. The notebook where you write to Sarah, you're going to need a bigger one. Because now you can actually give her those letters. When she's older, when she's ready, she'll have a record of how much you thought about her even when you were apart. That's a gift, Marine. Don't waste it." The months that followed were far from perfect. There were setbacks and struggles, days when Marcus's PTSD flared up, and he had to use every coping skill he'd learned to avoid spiraling. There were supervised visits with Sarah that went awkwardly, where the gap of 4 years felt insurmountable. There were nights when he woke up screaming from nightmares, and only calling Chains or Doc could bring him back to reality. But there were also victories. Sarah's school concert where Marcus sat in the audience, tears streaming down his face as he watched his daughter play clarinet in the school band. The first unsupervised visit where Jennifer trusted him enough to let Sarah spend an afternoon with him at the park. The day he got his first paycheck from his job at the Veteran Services Center and felt like a contributing member of society again. The trial concluded in August. Derek received 12 years, Carl got 10, Tommy got 25 as a repeat offender. The judge, in sentencing, specifically mentioned how their crime had sparked a community conversation about how society treats its most vulnerable members. Their names would be forever associated not just with violence, but with the catalyst for positive change they never intended to create. Marcus attended the sentencing, but he didn't speak. He'd said what he needed to say in that jail visit months ago. Now, watching them led away in chains, he felt only a distant kind of sadness. Not for them specifically, but for the waste of potential, the years they'd spend behind bars, the families they'd hurt. On the courthouse steps afterward, a reporter approached. "Mr. Sullivan, how does it feel to get justice?" Marcus thought about it carefully. Justice is important, but it's not what saved me. What saved me was brotherhood, was community, was people who cared enough to look past the surface and see someone worth fighting for. The Iron Brotherhood didn't wait for a trial to help me. They just helped. That's the story that matters. What would you say to other veterans who are struggling? That you're not alone, Marcus said. Even when it feels like you are, even when you're invisible to everyone walking past, you're not alone. There are people who understand, who've been through it, who will help if you just ask. It took me 4 years of suffering to learn that. Don't make the same mistake. Reach out. Accept help. You deserve to survive, and more than that, you deserve to thrive. The interview went viral, adding another chapter to the story. And in the wake of it, the Iron Brotherhood's phone started ringing. Veterans reaching out, asking for help. Community members wanting to volunteer. Donations pouring in to support their newly formalized Veteran Assistance Program. What had started as one biker making phone calls on behalf of one broken Marine had grown into a movement. A year after that night outside Riley's bar, the Iron Brotherhood held a special ceremony at their clubhouse. Marcus stood before the assembled chapter, wearing a leather vest they'd made for him. Not a full patch, he hadn't earned that yet, but a support vest, marking him as affiliated with the club, under their protection, part of their extended family. But there was more. On the back of the vest, above the Iron Brotherhood emblem, were new words: Guardian Program, Founder. Reaper stepped forward. "Brothers, today we officially launched something new. The Guardian Program is designed to help veterans transition from homelessness to housing, from isolation to community, from despair to hope. It's modeled on what we did for Marcus, but formalized, funded, and ready to scale. And Marcus Sullivan, the Marine we pulled off that parking lot a year ago, is going to run it." The chapter erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus, overcome with emotion, could barely speak. "I don't know what to say except thank you. You gave me back my life. You gave me back my daughter. You gave me purpose when I thought I had none left. This program, it's how I pay that forward. For every vet out there who's where I was, I promise we'll be there. Just like you were there for me." Sarah, now 13 and attending the ceremony with her mother's permission, stood in the front row beaming with pride. She'd been resistant at first to her father's involvement with a motorcycle club, but spending time around the Iron Brotherhood had changed her perspective. These men who looked so intimidating were actually gentle with her, respectful to her mother, and fiercely protective of her father's sobriety and recovery. Jennifer stood beside her daughter, her arms crossed, but her expression softer than it had been. She and Marcus weren't getting back together. Too much had happened, too much trust had been broken. But they were learning to co-parent again, to be allies in raising their daughter. It was messy and complicated, but it was working. After the ceremony, as people mingled and celebrated, Marcus found a quiet moment with Reaper. "You know, I've been thinking about that night. About why you really didn't intervene immediately." Reaper raised an eyebrow. "Haven't we covered this?" "Not all of it," Marcus said. "You told me you needed to see who I was, needed to let those guys show their true colors. But there's more to it, isn't there?" Reaper smiled slightly, impressed. "Smart Marine. What do you think the real reason was?" "Because if you'd stopped them immediately, I'd have been grateful, but I wouldn't have been transformed," Marcus said. The beating, as brutal as it was, it broke something open in me. I hit absolute rock bottom that night. I was as low as a human being could go. And that's when I finally was ready to accept help. If you'd saved me before that moment, I might have thanked you and gone right back to the streets, too proud or too broken to change. But that night, I had no pride left, no dignity left to protect. I was just a man who needed help, and for the first time in 4 years, I was willing to admit it. Reaper's expression confirmed Marcus's theory. Sometimes people have to fall all the way down before they can start climbing back up. We gave you space to fall, and then we made damn sure you had a rope to grab when you were ready. It was a hell of a gamble, Marcus said. What if I hadn't been ready? Then we would have helped you anyway, Reaper said simply. But we wouldn't have been able to help you as much. The difference between saving someone and empowering someone to save themselves, that's everything. You did the hard work, Marine. We just provided the framework. Marcus looked across the clubhouse at all the people who'd become his family. You know what the strangest part is? Those guys who attacked me, they thought they were teaching me a lesson. They thought they were putting me in my place. But all they really did was introduce me to you. Their worst moment created my best chance. How's that for irony? That's not irony, Reaper said. That's grace. The universe has a funny way of turning our darkest moments into doorways, if we're brave enough to walk through them. You were brave enough. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, Marcus stepped outside for some air. The parking lot where he'd once huddled against a wall, invisible and forgotten, now held dozens of motorcycles and the vehicles of supporters, volunteers, and fellow veterans. The same gravel where his blood had stained the ground was now packed with people who cared, who showed up, who believed in second chances. Sarah found him there, her young face thoughtful. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart. Do you ever see those guys? The ones who hurt you. Marcus shook his head. They're in prison. And honestly, I don't think about them much anymore. They were a chapter in my story, but they're not the story. What is the story? Sarah asked. Marcus thought about how to answer that. How to explain to his 12-year-old daughter the complexity of trauma and redemption, of falling and rising, of being lost and found. The story is that sometimes we all need help, he said finally. And sometimes the help comes from the most unexpected places. I was at my absolute lowest when a group of men who society told me were dangerous turned out to be the ones who saved me. That's the story, that you can't judge people by their appearance, that brotherhood means showing up when it matters, and that it's never too late to start over as long as you're willing to do the work. Sarah was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then she said something that made Marcus's heart skip. I'm proud of you, Dad, for not giving up, even when it was really hard. Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug, holding her close, breathing in the reality that he was here, she was here, they were together. I'm proud of you too, baby girl, for being brave enough to give me another chance. Not every kid would do that. Mom says you earned it, Sarah said. She says you did the work to get better. Your mom's right, Marcus agreed. But I couldn't have done it without help. That's what I want you to remember. Asking for help isn't weakness. It's courage. They stood together in the cooling evening air, father and daughter, separated by 4 years of loss, but reunited by persistence and grace. Behind them, the clubhouse glowed with light and laughter, filled with men who'd learned that true strength wasn't about violence or intimidation, but about lifting up those who'd fallen and refusing to let them fall again. Reaper emerged from the clubhouse, saw them standing together, and smiled. He didn't interrupt, didn't intrude. Just watched for a moment, satisfied that the gamble he'd taken a year ago had paid off in ways even he hadn't fully anticipated. Inside the clubhouse, on the wall near the bar, hung a photograph that had become iconic in veteran communities across the state. It showed Marcus on the night of the attack, his face battered and bloody, being loaded into an ambulance. Standing beside the stretcher, forming a protective barrier, were 7 bikers in full Iron Brotherhood colors. The caption read, "Sometimes the most unlikely guardians are exactly who we need." Beneath it was a smaller frame with a quote from Marcus's first interview. They didn't save me despite being bikers. They saved me because they understood what brotherhood really means. They'd all been broken at some point. They all knew what it meant to need help, and they refused to let another veteran fall through the cracks. That's not criminal. That's heroic. The Guardian program that Marcus now ran had helped 37 veterans in its first year. Some were success stories like his. Men and women who'd clawed their way back from homelessness, reconnected with families, found purpose. Others were still struggling, still fighting their demons, but at least they weren't fighting alone anymore. Each one of them knew Marcus's story, and each one of them had access to the network of Iron Brotherhood chapters across the state, which had transformed from a motorcycle club into an unofficial veteran support system that worked in ways the official systems often couldn't. As the stars came out above the clubhouse, Marcus felt Sarah's hand slip into his. Such a simple gesture, but it meant everything. It meant trust being rebuilt, piece by piece. It meant a future that included his daughter instead of just letters she'd never read. "Come on," Marcus said gently. "Your mom's probably ready to take you home. School night. Will I see you this weekend?" Sarah asked. "Saturday," Marcus confirmed. "We're going to that marine biology exhibit you wanted to see, remember?" Sarah's face lit up. "I can't wait. And Dad, can we maybe stop by here first? I want to show Razor that science project I've been working on." He said he used to like building stuff. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. His daughter wanted to spend time at the clubhouse, wanted to interact with his brotherhood. She saw them not as threats, but as extensions of her father's family. "Absolutely," he managed. "Razor will love that." As Jennifer pulled up to collect Sarah, she rolled down her window. "Marcus, you got a minute?" Sarah skipped to the car, and Marcus approached carefully, still maintaining the respectful distance of divorced parents learning to coexist. "I wanted to say something," Jennifer began, her voice uncertain. "I've been watching you this past year. The work you've done, the changes you've made. And I wanted you to know that I see it. I see you fighting every day to be the man Sarah needs. The man you used to be before the war broke you." Marcus waited, not sure where this was going. "I'm sorry," Jennifer continued, and tears sparkled in her eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you back then. I was scared and overwhelmed, and I had Sarah to protect. But I could have done more. Could have pushed harder for you to get help. Instead, I served papers and walked away. I've carried guilt about that." "Don't," Marcus said firmly. "You did what you needed to do to protect our daughter. You made the hard choice, the right choice. If you'd stayed, tried to fix me while I was refusing to be fixed, it would have destroyed all three of us. You leaving, it hurt, but it also forced me to confront my demons. Eventually, in the worst possible way. But still, these men," Jennifer gestured toward the clubhouse, "they did what I couldn't. They reached you when you were unreachable. They reached me when I was finally ready to be reached," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference. Don't carry guilt for my failures, Jen. You did everything right. You protected our daughter. That's what a parent is supposed to do." Jennifer wiped her eyes, nodding. "Thank you for saying that. And Marcus? Keep doing what you're doing. Sarah's getting her father back, and that's worth everything." As they drove away, Sarah waving from the window, Marcus stood in the parking lot feeling the full weight and wonder of how far he'd come. From that broken man bleeding on gravel to this. A father, a professional, a leader of a program helping others find their way back. Reaper appeared beside him. "Heavy thoughts, Marine?" "Just thinking about path dependency," Marcus said. "How one moment can change everything. If those guys hadn't attacked me that night, if you hadn't been there, if you'd intervened differently, if I hadn't been ready to accept help, any one of those variables changes, and I'm probably still on the streets. Or dead. Maybe," Reaper acknowledged. "Or maybe the universe was just waiting for the right alignment. Those boys needed to show their true colors. You needed to hit absolute bottom. We needed to be there to catch you. It all had to happen exactly how it happened." "You really believe in fate?" Marcus asked. "I believe in choices," Reaper said. "Those boys chose violence. You chose to keep getting up. We chose to help. And all those choices intersected at exactly the right moment to create something bigger than any of us planned. Call it fate, call it grace, call it random chance. Doesn't matter. What matters is we're all here now, doing something that matters." They walked back toward the clubhouse together, the sounds of celebration spilling out into the night. Inside, veterans laughed and told stories, sharing their struggles and victories with people who understood. The Iron Brotherhood had created something special here, a space where broken people could gather without judgment, where asking for help was seen as strength rather than weakness, where everyone had a story, but nobody was defined solely by their worst moments. Marcus paused at the door, looking back one more time at the parking lot. The place where he'd almost died had become the place where he'd learned to live again. The men he'd feared had become the family that saved him. And the worst night of his life had become the first night of everything that came after. "You coming?" Reaper asked. "Yeah," Marcus said, a genuine smile crossing his face. "I'm coming." And he walked inside, into the warmth and light and brotherhood, leaving the darkness of the parking lot behind him. Not forgotten, because the scars would always be there, but transformed into something that no longer had power over him. The homeless veteran who'd been beaten outside a bar was gone. In his place stood Marcus Sullivan, combat medic, father, survivor, and guardian to others still fighting their way back from the edge. The story that started with violence ended with redemption. And somewhere out there, in parking lots and street corners and forgotten places, other veterans were still struggling, still invisible, still waiting for someone to see them as human beings worth saving. But now there was a program. Now there was a network. Now there was proof that recovery was possible, that brotherhood was real, and that sometimes the most unlikely guardians were exactly who we needed. The Iron Brotherhood rode through darkness, but they carried light with them. And wherever they went, they left hope in their wake. Hope for the broken, the forgotten, the ones society had written off. Because that's what brotherhood meant. Showing up when everyone else had walked away. Standing guard when others looked away. And refusing, absolutely refusing, to let another soldier fall alone in the dark. Marcus stood at the center of it all, surrounded by his brothers, separated from his daughter by only days instead of years, working a job that gave meaning to his suffering, and for the first time in a decade, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The roar of motorcycle engines, the warmth of belonging, the knowledge that he mattered. These were his rewards for getting back up, for doing the work, for accepting the help when it finally came. 20 minutes. That's all it had taken to change everything. 20 minutes between the beating and the phone calls that would reshape his life. 20 minutes that proved the difference between revenge and redemption, between justice and transformation. Sometimes saving someone isn't about throwing a punch. Sometimes it's about making a phone call, pulling strings, activating networks, and refusing to let bureaucracy and indifference win. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose strategic compassion over immediate satisfaction. The Iron Brotherhood had learned that lesson, and now they were teaching it to everyone they touched. As the night deepened and the celebration continued, Marcus raised a glass of water, sober now and forever, in a silent toast to the men who'd saved him, to the daughter who'd forgiven him, and to the broken road that had led him here. Behind every veteran struggling on the streets, there's a story. Behind every person asking for help, there's a human being worthy of dignity. And behind every act of compassion, there's the potential to change not just one life, but ripple outward and transform communities. This was that ripple, spreading wider with each day, touching more lives, creating more hope. And it all started with 7 bikers who witnessed a beating, waited 20 minutes, and then changed the world with a series of phone calls instead of throwing a single punch. That was real power. That was true brotherhood. That was how you saved a life and built a legacy at the same time. Marcus smiled, raised his glass higher, and silently thanked whatever divine providence had brought him to that parking lot on that cold January night a year ago. The beating had been brutal, but the aftermath had been miraculous. Sometimes you have to be broken before you can be rebuilt. Sometimes you have to fall all the way down before you can learn to fly. And sometimes, just sometimes, the worst thing that ever happens to you becomes the doorway to the best thing you never imagined possible. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy. If this story moved you, leave a comment below about a time someone showed up for you when you needed it most. Your story might inspire someone else who's struggling right now. The end.